Welcome to the first shir, Masechet Rosh Hashana, really the second shir. The first shir, though, was a world ago. It was on Leil Hashana Rabbah, my sukkah. We're celebrating a siyum, a Masechet Sukkah, Baruch Hashem. We said Hadran Alach, Masechet Sukkah, V'Hadra Chalan, and we had a Sudat Mitzvah, and we celebrated. It was a very prayerful night, obviously, because it's Leil Hashana Rabbah, a night of Din. And unfortunately, since then, we're living in a different tekufa, a different era of Jewish history, and we've passed through it. So we're gathering together our strength to take from the Mishnah that we already learned, and tonight we'll start the Gemara without going through everything in the Mishnah in detail as we had last time, only because we're only going to really focus on the very beginning of the Mishnah tonight in the Shir, as you'll see why momentarily. And that's just to note at the beginning of the Masechta, Arba Rosh Hashanim Heim. There are 4 Rosh Hashana, and here they are. Be'echad b'Nisan Rosh Hashana l'Malachim, v'Lirgalim. It's Rosh Hashana for kings. That's what we're going to focus on tonight in the Gemara. L'Regalim for holidays. We'll see what that means in the Gemara as well. Rashi even says you'll see it in the Gemara. Be'echad be'Elul Rosh Hashana l'Maser Behema. Rabbi Lazav, Rabbi Shimon Omrim. Be'echad b'Tishrei. The Machloket about what you do for Maser Behema, what's the beginning of the fiscal year in terms of the tithing of animals. So is it really at Elul or is it really in Tishrei? Again, we'll come to all this in the Gemara. So all of these things having to do with the count of years, the Shemitah cycles, the Yovel cycles, for when things are planted and rooted for various kinds of tithes. Again, we'll come to it later. That has to do with Orla specifically. And then Yerakot with regard to vegetables. There's a Maser Yerek. It'll go according to that as well. And then the last one, which you're very familiar with, is the day known as Ashvat or Tu B'Shvat, depending. Abishvat, Tu B'Shvat, Bechad B'Shvat, Rosh Hashanah La'ilan, Kedir Beit Shammai, Beit Hil Omrim B'Chamisha Aser Bo. And that it has to do with the issue here of Maser for fruits. Was it go according to Chanata, which is the flowering of before the fruit comes? So that cutoff date is either Aleph Shvat or 15th Shvat. In 2 cases, there's a machloket about what the date actually is, Maser Behema, and for Maser regarding fruits on trees and the Ilan. But the other 2 dates, Nisan and Tishrei, not up for grabs. Everyone agrees that's the Rosh Hashanah for those categories. As we will see now, however, right now in Rashi and then in Tosfot, we'll note that there is actually a little more of a machloket than we bargained for. Actually, you know what? I'm going to table that. Let's not do the Rashi Tosfot on the Mishnah. Let's go into the Gemara, and then we'll have more of a perspective on what this is even about, so that we can dial back and see Tosfot, Rashi and Tosfot afterward, if time allows. The only other thing I wanted to say before we actually get underway with the introductory phase here is that sometimes the Baalei Tosfot are interested in stylistic questions of phraseology. Arba Rosh Hashanim Heim. And so the Baalei Tosfot point out that the word Hain shows up in many places where there's a list of items on categories. They'll have Hain. This is the first top Tosfot. But Arba Rosh Hashanim Hain. Our gear says Haim. Okay. Tosfot. B'chol duchte tane Hain. It always says Hain. Why? We find it here. There are 4 different shomrim: shomer chinam, shomer sachar, a socher, and a shoel. That's listed. There are 3 different types of psulin on an animal you're going to use for a korban. Three different kinds of wine that would be problematic with regard to yain nesach, etc. The list is endless. Aval, say the Baalei Tosfot, bereish Baba Kama tanan arba avot nezikin v'lotani hain. Why in Baba Kama doesn't it use the word hain? Like, why is it missing there? Is it a mistake? No. Mishum dekai abatre klamar arba avot nezikin halalu lor izeh kir izeh. The whole point of the list in Baba Kama, the first Mishnah, 4 chief categories of damagers, and they're all going to be contrasted with each other. And they're all a compare, a contrast in the subsequent Mishnayot and the Gemaras. Whenever it has the word Hain, it means there's a list, and this is the list that we need to know. They're not at loggerheads with each other, even if there's a debate about an exact category within one of them, but it's not a compare and contrast. When you get to the world of Dalet Avot Nazikin, you have Shor, Bor, Mava, and Hever. So the 4 categories are at loggerheads with each other. This one's not like that one, that each one needed to be specified, and not so for these. V'teid the Begemara b'minyana Rabbi Chia Rabbi Oshaya Tani Hain. According to the Bali Tosfot, when it'll come later on in Masechet Baba Kama to have expanded lists of Nezikin, of that which causes damage, it will say also for Rabbi Chia, who has 24, Rabbi Shaya, who has 13. It'll say the word Hain. That's what the Bali Tosfot say. And there's a little footnote over here that points out that some of the Girsaot don't even seem to have that for the 24 and the 13. Even the Bali Tosfot mentioned here, they had different manuscript. It's just an interesting stylistic point. Sometimes Bali Tosfot will say, compare this to other Mishnayot. Why is there a word difference between all of these categories versus what goes in a Baba Kama? Maybe this Tosfot will belong better in Baba Kama. I don't know, but it's printed here. Gemara, L'malachim, L'mai Hilchata. Why do we need to know with the issue of the of kings, of the time period of the beginning of the year of a king? Right, Rashi, right here on the Gemara, first Rashi on the Gemara. I davka skipped the one on the Mishnah because I don't want to read all of it now because we're going to hopefully come back to it. But that Mishnah would have told us that it was the custom to date things according to the king, not like today where you come to the wedding and this is Shnat Shmeish Talafim Ushvamiot Ushmonim Biva Arba Leminan Shanumonin Khan. There, and it was according to the king in documents, and therefore, but the Gemara asks Lamai Hilchata Klomar Lama Hukba Yom Miyuchad Leminyan Hamalachim Emashal Kol Melach v'Melach Tatchil Shnatom Yom Shamad Bo. Why can't it just be whenever the king started? That's the beginning of the year for the king. Why do you need a date? That's like the beginning of Nisan is Rosh Hashana for kings. Just say it's anytime they start work. That's the beginning of their reign. This one in whatever it's going to be in Shvat. This one in Tammuz. This one in Elul. Why does it have to always go back to Nisan per se? So the Gemara answers, Amar Rav Chizda lishtarot. It's for the sake of the different documents that will be written. Rashi lahavchin eze shtar chov mukdam lamalve ve'eze meuchar. They want to know which is considered a shtar mukdam and which is one that is considered meuchar. So now the introduction of definition of terms to understand what this is.
Was that explanation kicks out your suggestion that they count the years by the individual king's anniversary? It still can be written in the shtar according to that question. I mean,
yeah. Now that's what we'll have to see. Why there had to be a set time. That's going to be the Gemara's exact sugya. Why couldn't it just go according to? That's the Gemara's question. L'mai hilchata. So the answer is l'shtarot. Okay, so who cares? So let it be a rolling start date. Everyone will have to remember this king started on X date, Y date, and that'll be the starting point. So a definition of terms to begin to understand what's going on. At the time of a loan transpiring, at the occurrence of the loan, automatically at that moment, when the money changes hands in front of witnesses and goes to the borrower makes an implicit commitment, not only to pay back the loan, but has automatically also encumbered all of his property or her property to the lender, such that the borrower, any other transaction they will make subsequent to that loan, the first person who gets to collect, if the borrower defaults, doesn't pay back the loan, the lova doesn't pay back, the malva not only can go to the property of the lova, but can also go to find the people who the lova might have subsequently sold off his land to and tell them, I have a prior claim to this land, not you. Okay, that's what it means, a shibud karka. And that happens at the moment, right? That's the moment that's the collateral essentially is on property. At the moment, what? Real property as opposed to movables, yeah. Although movables could be indexed in a document, but the assumption is when the loan is taking place, the lova has automatically agreed, essentially implicitly, that they are going to allow all of the karka that belongs to them to be mishuabad, subjugated to the loan. If they default on paying it, the debtor can take the money back from whoever it is, and that person can't say, "But I bought the land." Yeah, but you bought the land after the loan. Okay.
So, real quick question. So, I understand that, but was there any appraisals done? In other words, if it's $100,000,
No, lav
the
dafka
property
beforehand.
is $500,000
La-
worth.
That would have to have done beforehand. The assumption was no one was lending money that was more valuable than than real property.
Okay.
But you're right. At a certain point, you'd have to start figuring that out. Now, that's step one, is the actual act of the loan. But there's another layer, and that's the document that indicates that there was a loan. So there's a document that has a date on it. And any sale of his own land that the love, that is the borrower, will do to a third party belongs back to the creditor, to the debtor, excuse me, to the malveh, if the love doesn't pay back the loan in time. So they can't pay. Okay, so the malveh says, I'm going to get it. Now listen to this. Oftentimes there was a discrepancy between the date that was written on the document and the actual time that the money was given for the loan. So that you would have a discrepancy between what's written in the document, the date on the document reflecting that the loan transpired, versus the actual moment when the money was given. Okay. Now, there's two possibilities. I mean, if it happened exactly at the same time, we're golden, but very often it was either a shtar mukdam or a shtar me'uchar. Mukdam early, me'uchar late. So a shtar mukdam, according to halacha, is pasul. A shtar me'uchar is mutter. Let me explain now what those mean. A shtar mukdam is pasul, and that could be as follows. There's a date on a shtar. That's the document that says Reuven borrowed $100 from Shimon, and it says in the 15th of the month. It says in the document that on this date, the 15th of the month, we're writing a document that the loan took place on the 1st of the month. So in other words, the date that it's written says, oh, this happened earlier. Okay, that's puzzle. I'll explain why in a minute. But that's point one. Point two, there's a document that's written that says on today is the first day of Nisan, and Reuven borrowed $100 from Shimon, but then the actual loan didn't take place then. The actual loan took place 15 days later on the 15th of Nisan, which, by the way, is obviously theoretical because it's Pesach, so it's impossible. But just for argument's sake, so 15th of Nisan, that would also be puzzle. That would not work. So there's two possibilities in Shtar Mukdam. One is where the date says the date today when the document's written, but tells us, oh, this happened a long time ago, however long ago. Or the document says on this date the money was given, but then it wasn't actually given till later on. That's called a Shtar Mukdam. That's puzzle. Why? The Gemara Bava Metzia explains. The gzera of the psul here is that we're worried that the malveh, that is to say the lender, will try to go to collect the land from someone who bought the land before the love became a love, really. And he'll start extracting property, real property, that doesn't truly belong to him, but he'll say, well, there's a document. Once there was a gap between what the document says and when the actual story happened, we're worried that the malva will take advantage and he will be able to say he has the document. But we know, and we even have witnesses to show, that there is a discrepancy between when it was written and when the actual loan transpired. That's called a Shtar Mukdam, because it's somehow backdated. The document's date is backdated to when the actual loan transpired. There's a discrepancy there, and one, or it could be actually either way, either the date or the loan, they're out of whack.
So if you write a contract just before Ben Hashmoshes, and you write it out for the date, but you don't get around to actually giving the money until after it says Chavim, is that considered Mukdam Muchar?
Correct, and therefore you would want to write on the star the later date. Why? Because the later date is Shtar Me'uchar. What's Shtar Me'uchar, which is kosher? Here are the two cases. Shtar Me'uchar. Shtar Me'uchar is you did a halva'ah a loan in the month of Nisan, but you didn't get around to writing the contract until Tishrei. And when you wrote that contract in Tishrei, you wrote in the contract in Tishrei, one Tishrei, again, theoretical, one Tishrei, whatever. Ruvain borrowed $100 from Shimon on one Tishrei. It really happened before, but it doesn't mention that. It just mentions that's when you'll ask me, well, why is that? Well, very simply, Reuven and Shimon are good friends. Reuven needs $100. He calls Shimon up. Can you do me a favor? I just got to borrow the money now. So you got to write a document. Do me a favor. We can't write it right now. So he gives him the money, but it comes around Tishrei. I realize he didn't get paid back yet. So he says to him, listen, I need this. I need you. We got to write a star. I'm not going to go back on the time passed, but now I want to write a star that you're paying me within 30 days. So Reuven borrowed the money from Shimon. He's not a thief. He says, okay, I accept. So they write the star in Tishrei. It sounds as if the money was borrowed in Tishrei, not back in Nisan months earlier. But that doesn't matter. That's when they wrote the star. Case number one. Case number two. The star was written.
When would he have to pay back within 30 days?
So let's say it's a stam contract 30 days. Okay, now from Tishrei, because that's when they wrote the star. Exactly. So in other words, really he owed him the money. Either he told him you'll pay me whenever you can, and he didn't specify when. He said, you have a year, I don't care. Verbal. And then it came Tishrei, you know what? We should write a contract. Maybe he put whatever the term he put a term there. Stam, the contract is 30 days. Let's say he said, I'll give you another year, but he put a time limit. Here's the key point is Shimon, who was the guy who gave the $100 to Reuven, Shimon cannot go to any of the people that Reuven might have dealt with between Nisan and Tishrei and say to them, Shimon borrowed Reuven borrowed $100 from me in Nisan, and then he sold the land. He defaulted on the loan. I want the money from you. They're going to say, well, where's the document? He's going to hold the document. Oh, it says Tishrei. Yeah, well, we sold it in Tammuz. But really, I gave him the money. There's no such document. Why? Because the moment of the document reflects the beginning, and that's called a star me'uchar. Why is it me'uchar? Because the loan happened already. Case one. Case two.
So
there's
doesn't have real property left.
It'd be too late.
And Shimon can't claim it.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Essentially, I'm going to do the why in a minute. Going to do the second case and I'll explain. Let me just finish the sentence here. The second case is there's a document that's written on the day of the loan in Nisan. Reuven comes to Shimon. Can you give me a loan? Shimon says 100%, but I do need you to sign a star. But I'll tell you what, we're going to write in the star Aleph Tishrei. It hasn't happened yet. We're writing Aleph Tishrei. Or it's before sunset. We're going to write the later date. Okay. Now, and then that would also be until the date that's written on the loan, even though actually it happened earlier, the date written on the loan is the date that's going to matter. Okay. Now, why is this true? The people who are involved in buying the property of Reuven, who borrowed the $100, but now he's selling off his land, which may be what precipitates Shimon to say, I think we have to write a contract, you and me, because I don't think at the rate we're going, we're gonna see my money. But they're not the people who are the buyers in between, let's say in our case, Nisan to Tishrei, they're not losing anything. Rather, the Malva essentially has agreed, I will not collect any land that was sold by you, Reuven, the debtor. I will not the creditor. Sorry, the lova, right? Until the date that is written on the star. The malva essentially is mochel on the shibud until that time. Okay, you understand how it works? So just the basics you need to know. Again, you don't have to memorize this now. We're going to get to the cases, but the basic idea here is that a star mukdam, where there's some disparity between what's reported in the star of the date when it's written versus when the money was actually given, or a case where the star has a particular date on it, but the actual transfer of the money didn't happen till later. That's both of those star mukdam. If there is, however, star mu'uchar, either the star was only written in Tishrei altogether, and it says, makes it sound as if the loan happened in Tishrei, or they gave the loan in Nisan and already wrote the document in Nisan, but they wrote the date in the future. That's a shtar me'uchar. It disadvantages the malveh because it essentially means he is effectively said, I'm mochel on the shibud karka claims until the date written on this document, which might not have happened yet.
So
Okay.
Reuven could sell all the property. during this time
Exactly.
period and then-
Shimon, Reuven's a nice guy, and Shimon thinks Reuven's a nice guy. He's not going to mess him over. Why did he wait? He says, I know you have trouble. I want this to take effect on Tishrei. It'll take time for you to sell off. You have vast tracts of land. I think you're good for the money, but we're writing it now so that if Tishrei comes and you still haven't paid me back, then I want some guarantee.
So-
What's the guarantee? Whatever property you have, real property you have left. Mark, go ahead, please.
Would it be fair to say that you couldn't, a star where the transaction has not occurred is puzzle?
Yeah.
And a star where the transaction has occurred, regardless of the timing, would be fine.
Well, except if the star is, let me think about that. If the star has a date that is 1st of Nisan, but the money didn't transfer till the 15th of Nisan, that would be a problem.
That would be puzzle. That would be
Yeah.
a star that did not
Star
have the
Muktam.
transaction.
Right.
It either has to be after the transaction
Or at the moment of.
or the
Essentially.
moment of the transaction.
Yeah. Yeah.
But in general, any star mukdam is puzzle.
Right. I don't want to go down this road because we got to get back to the Gemara here, but just to understand, this is a potential problem when the rabbi is Masada Kiddushin at a wedding that is taking place in November, where sunset is 4:21, and they made the chuppah for, I don't know what, for 3:45. And then, the back of someone's shoe gives way and they have to repair it. And the photographer is late and I don't know what. And the date is the earlier date and the sun is going to set. And then once it's dark outside, too late, you cannot, it's called shtar muktam. If, however, and this is what people sometimes do, they take an insurance card, they'll put the later date into the shtar. Now, why is that an issue with shtar muktam? Shtar muktam also has to do with issues regarding getting married and property and etc. So they're also the muktam problem. And remember that the ketubah, like this shtar, is not what's affecting the marriage or the loan. It's what's testifying to the reality of what's transpired or transpiring. Right? The date in this place, right? Mon and Khan, right? Amar, Chatan Dinan, Lahada Betulta, it's telling you the story about what happened. It could be that date, or it could be, or that's it. If it's talking about a previous date, but it didn't happen on that date, he didn't say Havil the Intukidat Moshe of Israel, then the date that he's saying Hariat Mekudeshetli is now the next date, but the star is the previous date. That's star muktam. That's a big problem. So we try in advance to talk with the chassan and kala. What day is your wedding? What time is your wedding? Sometimes they're not so religious. They're baffled. Why does the rabbi care 8 months before my special day what time the hors d'oeuvres are and when they're going to walk down the aisle and how many people are coming down the processional and what's the date? Like this, can't understand. Who cares? I don't know what are you gonna you getting geared up for what's going to be at the, you want to know the menu at the smorgasbord or something? So I have to explain. No, it's a whole thing with the document, but this is what happens. Now back to our regular scheduled Gemara.
Right. So with kings,
what?
With kings, you would need some standardization to be able to keep track of this, as the base would have to keep track of all this, right?
So now we're coming to the business with the kings. So with kings, you would need some kind of standardization to figure out who's who, right? So
Especially if you had two kings within 1 year.
especially if you had two kings within 1 year, right? So let's just take an easy example. On Lahavdil, on what day did Queen Elizabeth II pass away from the world? September 8th? That was good. I didn't remember that. And on what date was Prince Charles made into King Charles?
It was later. It was a couple of weeks later. It was
Huh?
definitely later.
Well, when was his coronation? When did he become the king? When he became coronated, or when his mother died and he automatically became the king? September 8th, so he became the king. So we don't care about the coronation, we care about that. But why did he need a coronation? I mean, he had some status in between. So what date is going between September 8th and whatever time of day she died and the day of the coronation? The date according to her, according to him, who is it going according to?
Well, he became king right away.
So he became king right away, but still had to do a formality of a coronation. How did he become the king? Did he become the king because play pass to the next player, and there's a dynastic line, sure. But also, isn't there a whole group that has to formally induct him into becoming the king? There's a ceremony.
Which they did the next day.
Yeah. So the queen died, and what do they say? Long live the queen. Then they say, long live the king.
They said.
It's a little, the point is, these things become murky. Do I know that I'm going to be in a share with someone who actually literally remembers the English date? That's incredible.
What did they teach
Incredible.
in elementary?
What?
What did they teach in
No,
elementary?
I don't remember anymore. I don't remember anymore. By the way, I have to speak about this in shul at some point, but yesterday was a very important day for me. I was born again as an American citizen 10
But-
years ago yesterday. So this is like a
Born
big, I'm a born again. 2013 to 2023, 10 years, born again. That's the expression I use. I'm still a Canadian citizen, dual citizen, and I have no recollection of what they taught us about the queen. And at that time, they thought she would live forever, I guess. God save the queen. She wasn't going to
They
die.
probably say the queen is dead, long live the king.
It's something like whatever it is. But the point is it on that date? And how many other people in the room, other than someone who's brilliant and remembers all the dates, actually remembers like the queen of it? I don't know. It was a date. And what Mark's point is, you got to be some kind of standardization.
No,
You
but
need
wouldn't
some
the,
kind of start.
wouldn't the Starot have adium, and wouldn't there be, and didn't they would have had adium that said this is the
Right.
day, right?
Right, sort of, ish. Because here's a big problem in antiquity. It's a big problem. It's a big problem. People didn't always exactly, first of all, know their birth date, their own birth date. That guy, they call him Pesach because he was born on Pesach, Aleph. And Bet, they didn't always exactly, not every person knew the year necessarily, especially at a time when there's a lot of turnover. So how do you hold it together? Now, that's actually the next piece of the Gemara. It's kind of like, well, how do we figure out what year of the king it is? And that's the next line of the Gemara. The Gemara just says, Rav Chizda says, L'shtarot titnan, as we learn, and it's quoting here elsewhere in Shas and Bava Metzia, right? Shtarei chov hamukdamim psulin, v'mucharin ksherim. Those that are early are pasul. That's what we just learned now. Those that are later are kosher. Tanu Rabbanan, melach she'amad be'esrim v'tisha ba'adar. In other words, last day of Adar, this fellow becomes the king. Kevin Shigia Echa B'Nisan Al Tolo Shana. He's in year 2 of his reign. As soon as you cross to the 1st of Nisan, V'im lo amad ela be'echa b'Nisan. But if you didn't start work until the 1st day of Nisan, ein monin lo shana ad shiagia Nisan acher. It need a whole year afterward. So that's quite something. So the Gemara now says, Amar Mar,
1 day makes a year's difference.
where the year's difference, right? So long live the king is in year 2 of his reign because it passed through Aleph Nisan. And again, there's some confusion, like, but it's only been a day, passed through Aleph Nisan. Now, why would that work as opposed to, as people were pointing out, so let it be a rolling thing. As you pointed out, Mark, there's going to be witnesses. There are going to be people who are aware of what's happening. So the witnesses will come and say, oh, it was that date. Yeah, like I remember what year. What do you need? The specificity. It's the king and what year of the king, and it goes by a particular date on the calendar as the formal switchover. And by the difference of 1 day, it'll be the first year or the second year of his reign. But that's exactly what it's saying. So Amar Mar, Melech she'amad be'esrim v'tisha ba'adar, Kevin shigia echad b'Nisan al telo shana. Right? Hakamash malan. The Nisan Rosh Hashana l'malachim. Yom echad b'shana chashuv shana. That seems to teach us that that 1 day of the year is a year. V'im lo amad ela be'echad b'Nisan, and monin lo shana ad sheyagia Nisan acher. Right? So then, right after that, it says, oh, and by the way, remember how we said a second ago, if he started on the 29th of Tishrei, of Adar, so the next day, it's already year 2. Then the second point is, oh, and if he starts the 1st of Nisan, he has to wait a whole new year. Wasn't that obvious? That's what the Gemara's question is. So Pshita, right? Lo tzricha. The imnu ale me Adar. The imnu ale me Adar means, look at the top, Rashi, the top line, end of the top line. The imnu ale, nimnu v'gamru hasarim limnoto. On the 29th of Adar, when the queen died, the king who took over, they decided he's going to be the king. When will we do the coronation? Tomorrow, Aleph Nisan. But actually, when the first person died and the second person took over, and the royal retinue who's in charge of, announcing and proclaiming who the new king is and announcing law of the king, we can't get the coronation together. We need 24 hours, and maybe we need a few months. He's already the king. So that's the point, right?
So you couldn't do that if.
Ma'udatema nimnu le tartin shanin kamash malan. You might have thought the fact that on the 29th of Adar, he started work in as much as the retinue, the House of Lords, whoever it is, announced this is going to be the new king. We just can't do a coronation today. It's going to happen tomorrow, Aleph Nisan. So you might have thought, well, he started work. So now Aleph Nisan is already day 2 of his work. So he's already been the king for 2 days. But it's really actually in his second year because a whole year went by in 1 day. No, Kamash Malan, that's the second statement. It's the day of the coronation that will be determinative. He's coronated 29 Adar, then the next day is already year 2. If he's coronated Aleph Nisan, then that's the beginning of the year. It doesn't go by the gap between being declared the new king and actually being coronated.
So if he was declared and coronated on Aleph Nisan.
Then it would for sure be the whole year till they get a whole year through. If on 29 Adar he was declared and coronated, then the next day would be year 2 of his reign.
But it was Aleph Nisan.
Aleph Nisan will go a whole new year. That's the point here of the Gemara.
That's what we started off with.
Pardon?
We started off with saying that Aleph Nisan
Hashana for
is,
kings.
Rosh Hashana L'Malachim.
kings.
Right.
And that's what the explaining of the Gemara.
That's what they're explaining. But the point is when it's just on the line between the end of 1 year and the beginning of the new year, and he's in some kind of middle category, hasn't formally been coronated, but everybody knows it's him because he's the new designated guy. Is that going to be enough? No. Need the coronation. And if the coronation was delayed and it happened Aleph Nisan, Bet Nisan, Gimel Nisan, even if he was commanding the army from 27 Adar, 26 Adar, when his father died, it doesn't matter. He started his job formally in the new year. You're going to ask me, so what are they going to write on the star? 27, 28, 29? They're going to write the old king's date, even though he's actually dead. Because the new king hasn't been coronated yet. And we're going to join with me. It's the next piece. Okay. So Tana Rabbanan, Meit ba'adar va'amad acher tachtav, right? Be'adar. The king died in Adar. The new king took over in the same month of Adar. Monin shana lezeh ulezeh. Monin shana lezeh ulezeh, according to some, Rashi, for instance, look at Rashi's second line of Rashi, lezeh ulezeh. Habalich tov star ba'adar la'achar sha'amad hasheni im ratza lichtov b'star bishnat ploni l'melach shemet kotev v'im ratza kotev b'shana rishona l'melach ploni she'amad. You could put in the 14th year of Queen Elizabeth or in the first year of King Charles, even though she died, because it's still part of her year. When you're still at the end of the year, if it was Shvat, so Shvat, right? And that Shvat into Adar that whole time. Tevet Shvat Adar. Whenever the king dies in that year, Rashi's contention is you're going to put whichever date you want, the dead king moving backward or the new king who is alive. Everybody's going to remember this is what they thought in antiquity, right? If I start quizzing everybody, except for Benny, but if I start quizzing everybody, including me, how long did King Yehoshaphat rule and how long was King Yoshio and how long was King Yehu? Most of us like, I don't know. But in the antiquity, they didn't have sports stats. That's what they remembered. This king was this number, this number, this number. People remember certain numbers. You remember David HaMelech is 40 years. Okay, we get that one. But some of them were odd numbers. They were not Achav and, so it's much more confusing. You understand? So the point was, you're writing in the shtar, according to Rashi, either this one or that one. You could choose. Other Rishonim didn't agree with Rashi's view. Once you hit Nisan, then whoever is the king as Nisan begins on Aleph Nisan, that's for the new year.
And I
Follow?
assume it doesn't matter if it's a Shana, if it's a leap year. I assume it doesn't matter.
Right. Nisan is Nisan is Nisan. Right. If there's an extra other, it's an extra other.
Doesn't
Right.
matter.
Right.
So what happened
So-
with David HaMelech for the 7 years when he was in hiding and he was supposedly coronated and then they had to re-coronate him later?
It's 7.5 years.
7.5
Yeah, in
years.
Hebron. Right.
Right.
Right. But then that's he's already the king then.
He was the king.
That's
then,
after
even
he's already
though-
then he's already king. But you're saying between the time
Yeah.
Shmuel gave him the charge and until he actually took the reins, which by the way, how did it actually happen? Shaul was killed.
Okay. Yeah,
When
yeah.
Shaul died, he naturally was the king because he had already been anointed. Shmuel and Navi, everybody knew it was going to be him next. Remember, that was everybody knew because there was a bounty out on his head that his father-in-law was going after him, literally, because he wanted to do him in because he was right. Remember, so he's already coronated. So the coronation happened already. But the point is, when you're thinking about all these dates, you could see how in antiquity it would be very confusing to figure out. You have to have a real awareness of who the king is at that time.
Yeah.
And if the king or queen died, who's next? And in years of upheaval where it could be many people, the start, we're going to be all over the calendar. What's it about? So the next piece of the Gemara is Tana Rabbanan, to read it again. Mate be'adar ve'amad acher tachtav be'adar monin shana lezeh ulezeh. Mate be'nisan, let's say the king died in Nisan. Ve'amad acher tachtav be'nisan monin shana lezeh ulezeh. So the king dies, let's say, in the month of Nisan, and the new king takes over in Nisan. You could still, the entire last year would be still be the 40th year of David HaMelech's reign, even though Shlomo HaMelech's already the king, even though he died. But if he died in the month of Nisan, I mean, he didn't die in Nisan, by the way, but he died on Shavuot, but he died in Sivan, and his son took over in Sivan. So it would be year 1 of King Shlomo, which is also year 40 of King David.
Point of having the option for a whole year.
That's Rashi's contention. Not for tonight. Another night, we'll see. There are other Rishonim who didn't agree. They thought that Lezeh doesn't mean exactly that, but I don't want to go down there now.
Still hung up on the original point. I understand the rule completely. It's a well-defined rule, it's easy to follow. But I still don't understand why there has to be a rule with a fixed date. There could
Altogether.
be you can also make a well-defined rule using the date of the current, that his reign starts the day he became king. And,
Yeah.
I don't understand.
So
any of this
bear with me. We're about to get there. Bear with me. It's the Gemara's question, in fact. Bear with me. So let's keep going. Your question's excellent, but let's we're gonna understand it. Made ba'adar. V'amad acher tachtav b'Nisan. So one died in Adar, and the new king was not put up until Nisan. Okay, so monin rishona l'rishon ushniya l'sheni. In the first year, meaning in the year that's ending, end of Adar, you're going to go by the first king, even though he died, and someone else was already running the country, but he wasn't coronated till Nisan. So till the end, you're going to still go by the old king. And once you hit the beginning of Nisan, and this king was the new king was coronated in Nisan, we're going to use in the second year the new year, starting in Aleph Nisan, by the new king. Amar Mar, made ba'adar v'amar acher tachtav ba'adar, monin shana lezeh ulezeh. So now the analysis. If the person died in Adar and another person took over in Adar, you could choose whichever date you want. Pshita. Yeah? So Maudatema, you would have thought, Shata lebeit trei lo maninan, kamash malan. You might have thought it's impossible to have two different start with two different dates on them that are the exact same year. 40th year of David, first year of Shlomo, kamash malan. Yeah, you could do that. And everyone had to realize that there was going to be overlap at that time. Mate b'Nisan, v'amad acher tachtav b'Nisan. Let's say someone died, the king died in Nisan, another one took over in Nisan. Modin shana lezeh pshita. Isn't that also pretty obvious? Maudatema would have thought, ki amrina and yom echad b'shana chashuv shana b'sof shana. When do you hold? You might have thought, when do you consider the one day like an entire year? That's when it's 29 Adar, because you're crossing to a new year. But from Nisan, Iyar, Sivan, Tammuz, it's one big long year. Come on. I mean, the king died. It's a new king. So the Gemara says, kamash malan, that it does work. That you can have the overlap within that last year of the previous king and the first year of the new king. Mark, you had a question before we do the next case?
Yeah, I got to work this out a little bit, but the logic of the chov or the shtar mukdemet, the post-dated, doesn't seem to apply with the king, right? Meaning you have the king die on day one and he's coronated in Nisan, right?
Right.
That's the same concept as making the loan in Adar and having the shtar be done in Nisan.
Right.
Which
I'm
we
about
said
to
was
plug it in.
puzzle.
Right. Okay. So time out. This is all set up. And it's also, the art has along these lines, same question. I'm going to set it up.
I didn't hear him.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
I'm not copying. I didn't
what
hear
you
him.
said. Basically. I mean, like, how does this all plug back in? So bear with me, a couple more cases here, and I'm going to plug it back in, and hopefully it'll fall into place. So we're coming to the end here for tonight in the reading. Made ba'adar v'amad acher tachtav b'Nisan. He died in Adar, and then a new king came in Nisan. was coronated in Nisan. Mona Rishon L'Rishon, Ushni L'Sheni. Pshita, isn't that obvious? Lo, tzricha, you need it. Why? The Imnu Ale Me'adar, right? Because he was already appointed to the next one. And what other case? Umelech ben Melechu. Maudatema Nimnu Le Tartin Shanin Kamash Malan. You would have even thought, hypothetically, I'm just using it as an example because his father's son. If David died in Adar, everybody knows it's going to be Shlomo, right? The king is dead, long live the king. The coronation won't happen till Nisan. So you might have thought, well, if that's the case, so David's year ends, end of Adar, and when Nisan starts, obviously Shlomo's year, it's very simple, right? Because it was a Melech ben Melech, so it wasn't a surprise who the king was going to be. Dynastic. Kamash Malan, yeah, even in that case, if there was a great gap between the death and the functional de facto rulership of the son till the time of the coronation, which happened in the new year, we're gonna put it at the coronation as the beginning of the new king's reign in terms of dating, in terms of dating things. Let me plug this in so you understand what's going on, because I know there's a lot of questions about this. There's a date that's written in a shtar. The date written in a shtar, I got this thanks to the Masifta Gemara because it laid it out so beautifully. There's a date written on a shtar. Reuven borrowed $100 from Shimon in the month of Kislev. Okay, that's the star says the month of Kislev. Then two guys come to court and they say, we were at the loan. We know that the loan happened in the month of Tammuz. Okay, so now here's the question for the court: which came first, Kislev or Tammuz? Which is first, Kislev or Tammuz?
Right, which one?
Kislev's first? Is it really? Kislev's first? Kislev's first?
Depends.
Well, let's go. I'll just start. Nisan, Iyar, Sivan, Tammuz, Av, Elul, Tishrei, Mar Cheshvan, Kislev. So Tammuz came first. Or maybe Kislev's first. Tishrei, Mar Cheshvan, Kislev, Tevet, Shvat, Adar, Nisan, Iyar, Sivan, Tammuz. Oh, now why do we care? Because what we talked about, Shtar Muktam, Nafkamina. If the date written on the shtar is before the loan, right? The date on the shtar before the loan, that's a shtar muktam. That's possible. It's not going to work. If, however, the loan happened first, and then there's a date written on the shtar, and the shtar is afterward, that's a shtar meuchar, and that's kosher. So when you write on the date in the year of the fourth year of King so and so, so it'll say, right? When the fourth year of King fill in the blank, King Yehu, pick the name, King Yoshiyahu. So in Kislev, the fourth year of King Yoshiyahu, in Tammuz, the fourth year of Yoshiyahu. So in Kislev, the fourth year of Yoshiyahu, that's on the shtar. And then the two witnesses come and they say, in Tammuz of the fourth year of Yoshiyahu. Is that a shtar muktam or shtar meuchar?
Again,
It's the fourth year.
but it could be the fourth year going this way.
No, but he
Exactly,
said it
except
has
for
to be
one
the
thing, which is
year.
the Mishnah says the beginning of the year is the first of Nisan.
Right.
Ta-da! When you know the beginning of the year is always going to be the first of Nisan, then you know proof positive. It's anchored in a spot that when it says the fourth year of King so-and-so, then you can order all the months in a particular order. So in the shtar, the tarikh is in Kislev, and the witnesses come and they say, we testify on the fourth year in Tammuz, we saw it. Oh, so the loan happened in Tammuz, Av, Elul, Tishrei, Mar Cheshvan, Kislev. And that's the stars of Mar Kislev. Shtar Meuchar, it's kosher. And the only way to do that is if you actually have an anchored moment that is the line, bar none, for the loans going around and around year over year. That's the cutoff time. Because otherwise, you would always be lost in this, like, well, when exactly was it? It's like a shell game. Well, which was first? I don't know. It depends when you start and end. The monkey wrench in all of the things that I'm saying, which Rashi says something, the beginning of the Masechta, the first Rashi, and Tosfot right away calls him on it, and the Pnei Yeshua tries to defend Rashi, is look at Rashi, the first Rashi. Rashi writes, Regilim hayu limnot zman shtarotehem lishnot hamelach mishana she'amad ba'hamelach kinarminu Masechet Gittin mishum shlom malchut. V'kavu chachamim echad b'Nisan l'tchilat shnato va'afilu amad b'Shvat o b'Adar kalta shnato mishigia Nisan v'yatchilu limnot lo shana shniya. Right? The automatic cutoff date is then the minhag was to count the shtar according to the years of the king. As it says in Masach Gittin, it was because of Shlom Malchut, to keep peace with the kingdom. And the Chachamim decided it should be Aleph Nisan, and therefore, even if he reigned 3 days before Aleph Nisan, that's the cutoff date, and the year would change. So you would know that the anchor is on that spot to keep Shtar Muktam, Shtar Ma'uchar constant. The problem is, as the Bali Tosfot point out right here, the second Tosfot, L'Malachim, Perish Bekuntus Mishum Shlom Malchut, Ve'eno, but that's not correct. Why? Dehacha, because in our Mishnah, L'Malcha Yisrael Kamairi, our Mishnah is talking about Jewish kings, not non-Jewish kings. Jewish kings go according to Nisan. Non-Jewish kings, whatever the date, or September 8th, Tishrei. That's why I was so, it's sad to say, but I was so excited that Queen Elizabeth was taken from the world exactly the right moment to give me a beautiful Rosh Hashana drasha about coronation and the pomp and circumstance and the coins that are minted by kings and queens to be remembered. And the Chachamim don't mint coins with their faces on it, but the coins they mint are the syntax of brachot, of kiddush, of havdalah, of shmona esrei. That's the matbea shetivu Chachamim, right? And the notion that we're being mamlich HaKadosh Baruch Hu and we're pageantry and coronation. Okay, I'm getting into drasha land, but it played beautifully to my in drasha land. But the point is, the Baitos said to Rashi, I'm sorry, what are you talking about? The whole thing with Aleph Nisan has to do with the kings of the Jewish people. The Gemara in Gittin seems to be Shlom Malchut. You need to keep the peace with the kingdom. That's not Jewish, not the Jewish kingdom, and that's not Aleph Nisan. Right. So what do you mean they chose Aleph Nisan? They chose Aleph Nisan for the Malchei Yisrael, not the Malchei Umad HaOlam. So V'davka Gabe Gittin Amrin and Hachi Perak HaZorik. If you look at Masechet Gittin, it's specifically with regard to Gittin. They have to do the date according to the king. Amar Ulu Mipnei Ma Tiknu Malchut BeGittin Mishum Shlom Malchut. V'gabe Gittin Psulin Vadai Afilu Malchut She'ena Hogenet. Right. Kemalchut Madai V'Yavan. So it goes on to describe there a whole thing that the Malchut She'ena Hogenet means Rome. That you can't date according to Rome. And you shouldn't even use Madai and Yavan. You should use actual kings. Our Mishnah is talking about regular contracts for money that's changing hands. Or per comment the Bagola ein monin in Chutz La'aretz. We do not count except according to who? I go to Bach, right? The Bagola ein monin, right? Lishtarot is the word missing according to the Bach. El Malche Yavan Bilvad. We only use the kings of Greece. Umaskina nami hatam delumalachim dahacha l'malchei Yisrael, and also concludes over there that the kings being referenced here are Jewish kings. V'chein amrin lekam begemara lo shanu el l'malchei Yisrael ela aval l'malchei umad olam mitishrim meninan. For the malchei umad olam, when we're under their thumb, so that's who sets the clock. Aval l'malchei umad olam mitishrim. Okay, v'tzarich lefarsh. We must say the ain't tzarich shlom malchut. Ela beget Isha. The issue of Shlom Malchut only appears in the Get Isha. The Vishu Davar Gadol. It's a very important document. Unlike the document of a Ketubah or a document of a Shtar on a Halva, they're both significant, but not as much as a Get. Why? Because a Get affects the actual Get, the document. Mm-hmm. The Ketubah tells the story about the transfer of the ring and the commitment. The Shtar says the loan happened. It's not the money, it's telling you that the money was given. So, beget Isha. Lefishu davar gadol, chashivut, lefisha al yidei get, mutaret, lechol adam, v'chashim mishar shtar. It's more important than the other shtar. We won't go into it more there, but just to say, like that's fascinating. By the by, in the year 312 BCE, things changed. And what happened there? That was called the Minyan Hashtarot. In the year 312 BCE, it had to do with the Greeks were still running things. That was considered the beginning of the years again. And until the time of the Geonim, people were writing in the Shtar according to the Minyan Shtarot. There was a competing system that was growing more prominent, which actually became the halacha afterward, which is according to Briat HaOlam. And the Briat HaOlam based on, again, the biblical chronology, Seder Olam Rabbah, starting from Breshit, adding up all the years of the people. That's how we got to 5, 7, 8, 4. It wasn't always that way. And what we'll see next time or the time after, is there are other contenders for how one should do dating on documents and the like, but for that, we'll have to wait till next week. Adcon for tonight. God willing, next week there will be a shir. We'll continue, God willing, even with all the challenges that we have. It's so important that we learn, and great to have everyone here.
Just,
Adcon for tonight.
just to.
Laila Tov.
Okay,